One of the most urgent tasks of our country is to decisively defeat the climate hysteria hoax.
We are in the beginning of a mass extinction.
The ability of CO2 to do the heavy work of creating a climate catastrophe is almost nil at this point.
The price of oil has been artificially elevated to the point of insanity.
That's not how you power a modern industrial system.
The ultimate goal of this renewable energy, plan is to reach the exact same point that we're at now.
You know who's tried that? Germany. 7 straight days of no wind for Germany. Their factories are shutting down.
They really do act like weather didn't happen prior to 1910.
Today is Friday.
That's right, Greta. It is Friday, and it is the best day of the week. And not just because the weekend is almost here. It's because this is the day the Heartland Institute broadcasts the Climate Realism Show. My name is Jim Lakely. I'm your host. I'm the vice president of the Heartland Institute. We are an organization that has been around for 41 years and is known as the leading global think tank pushing back on climate alarmism. Heartland and this show bring you the data, the science, the truth to counter the climate alarmist narrative you've been fed every single day of your life. There is nothing else quite like the Climate Realism Show streaming anywhere. So I hope you will bring friends to view this live stream every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And also like, share, and subscribe. And also leave your comments underneath the video. These very easy actions convince YouTube's mysterious algorithm to smile upon this program. And that gets the show in front of even more people. And as a reminder, because big tech and the legacy media do not really approve of the way we cover climate and energy policy on this program, Heartland's YouTube channel has been demonetized. So if you want to support this program, and I really hope you do, please visit heartland.org/TCRS. That's heartland.org/TCRS. And you can join other friends of this program who contribute a little bit to us and help us bring this show to the world every single week. Before we get rolling here, I want to thank also our streaming partners, junkscience.com, CFACT, What's Up With That, the CO2 Coalition, and Heartland UK Europe. We have a very information-packed show today, and it should be a lot of fun, so let's get started. Today we have with us, as usual, Anthony Watts, Senior Fellow at the Heartland Institute and publisher of the world's most viewed website on climate change, What's Up With That? We have Sterling Burnett, Director of the Arthur B. Robinson Center on Climate and Environmental Policy at the Heartland Institute, and Linnea Lueken, Research Fellow for Energy and Environment Policy at Heartland. And we also, of course, as always, have our producer, Andy Singer, behind the scenes, making sure this show looks and flows great. And we want to welcome back to the show today, Steve Milloy, the climate hoax slayer, author, publisher of junkscience.com, former EPA transition team member, and a member of Heartland's board of directors, and the owner of a very great microphone that we were getting hooked up for the show today. That's why we were a couple of minutes late. Welcome back to the show again, Steve. Always fun to have you.
Thanks for having me, Jim. It's great to be here.
All right. We do, like I said, we do have a packed show today, so I want to get right to it. No more chit chat. Let's get to, as we always do, the crazy climate news of the week. Hit it, Andy. Thank you very much, Bill Nye. Our first item today, I've titled Greta Must Be Furious, and I'm sure she is. This item comes from Inside Climate News with the headline, Sweden, an early climate leader, is retreating from its environmental commitments, part of an EU trend. We've been covering that on this program for quite a while. Let me read a little bit here from the story. 5 years after the European Union vowed to lead the creation of the, quote, first climate neutral continent by 2050, and pledged at least €1 trillion to that effort, a long list of organizations, companies, and agencies are accusing the EU of rolling back its European Green Deal with deregulation. Some critics have gone so far as to argue that the 27-nation union, the world's third largest carbon emitter, is now starting to mirror rather than counter the dismantling of climate efforts in the United States. Part of the explanation for the EU's retreat on climate can be found in Sweden. For decades, the small northern country pushed Europe's climate ambitions upward, but today, Sweden is falling back from its environmental progress. Last year, its fossil fuel emissions saw their biggest increase in 15 years. During that time period, carbon uptake by its vast forests have been halved. And since the country swung to the right in its last general election, the government has slashed its investments in climate action. Researchers say that Sweden's policy shifts and its evolving role as a frontrunner is now contributing to the overall weakening of Europe's climate agenda. The German Climate Change Performance Index quoted its experts saying that, quote, Sweden is backtracking from being a frontrunner in international climate policy, unquote, and that they demanded that, quote, the government maintain progressive climate policies. However, the government has halted investments in high-speed rail, canceled subsidies for electric vehicles, stopped its support for undersea cables, leading private companies to stop offshore wind products, increase taxes on solar electricity, cut its investments in several green innovation funds, and making funding available to municipalities for unpredictable things like more efficient heating systems and charging infrastructure for electric cars. Now, thank you for your patience for that long read. But Anthony, I want to start with you. This is Greta Thunberg's home country. This is ground zero for radical climate action. And, they're slipping. And I know Steve's happy, but how do you feel?
Yeah, I was just doing some research to see if Greta has actually said anything about this particular event in 2025, and she's been, as far as I can tell, completely mute on the subject, probably because she's still too busy worrying about, future boat trips over to Gaza or something like that. But Greta has always been hypocritical. She never really believed, I don't think, what she was saying. I think she was, goaded into saying those things by her handlers, where they saw an opportunity. And, the point is, her voice doesn't really matter anymore. The fact is that economics and common sense are governing this particular event with Sweden. And, irrational statements from Greta aren't really going to make any difference, even if she had made some. So, as far as I'm concerned, more power to the Swedish government to, stop the craziness. And I look forward to something entertaining but useless from Greta.
How dare you?
I'm going to agree and disagree with Anthony. I think she believed it. There's no question she had handlers. But when she started out in school complaining, she didn't have handlers then. She believed it. Remember, she's got a mild form of some kind of autistic spectrum, and it makes her concentrate on something. And she was concentrating on climate. Now she's concentrating on Palestine. Maybe the Swedish government has gone over to the Palestinian side, and so that's why she's not complaining. I don't know. But I will say this. When did Donald Trump get elected president of Sweden? Because those policies sound a lot like what's going on here in the U.S.
Yeah. Steve, this is a theory that I've had, that I've had the theory that since Donald Trump has been rolling back all of the green madness here in the United States, that inevitably Europe would have to follow suit. They would do it quietly, but they can't just be sticking out there all alone on a road to nowhere.
Well, so as I recall, Sweden's been doing this now for a couple of years. They got a new government, and the new government right away started whacking back on the green nuttiness. I think Sweden is kind of a thought leader in insanity in Europe. The reality is that this green stuff is not working anywhere in Europe. Germany is quietly starting to roll some of this back. I mean, not that fast, not entirely, because even the conservatives in Germany are socialists, if not worse. And in Spain, I think they had that blackout from the failure of wind and solar in April. They were only saved by the French nuclear fleet, and so I think that has taught some people some lessons. So look, in the end, as we always said, green stuff doesn't work. I mean, there's a certain amount you can load onto the grid and still have electricity, but you get to that tipping point, it becomes really a dicey situation. And we're at that point, and Europe is walking it back a little bit.
Yeah. Yep, for sure. I love how all those countries that they had mentioned that were troublesome have all shifted, quote unquote, to the political right. And in political sense.
A few years ago, there was the term coined climate disruption, and that's what we're seeing right now. Their climate goals are being disrupted. So yay!
That's right. Yeah. Well, like I said, the story noted that there were 5 countries that were once seen as leading the world on climate action: Sweden, the Netherlands, Germany, Finland, and Austria. And Inside Climate News laments that they've all moved to the political right. Well, get used to it, I guess. All right, let's move on to our second item now. And this is apparently global warming makes you dumb. This story comes, we were alerted to it by our friend and streaming partner, Mark Morano of Climate Depot, but it's from the Los Angeles Times. Headline: Rising heat is causing students to underperform across the globe. So here, I'll read a little bit from it. As climate change drives temperature higher, prolonged periods of heat exposure are doing more than just making classrooms uncomfortable. According to a new systematic review published by PLOS Climate, extended exposure to heat significantly impairs students' cognitive abilities, affecting their academic performance, especially in complex subjects such as mathematics. The study analyzed previous research encompassing nearly 14.5 million students across 61 countries. The findings show clear evidence that heat exposure over time is correlated to lower scores in math and other complex cognitive tasks among elementary, middle, and high school students. Even on days when temperatures were between 80 and 90 degrees Fahrenheit, the data shows that students can experience heat stress, followed by a drop in cognitive performance. And then, of course, the story goes on to tell us, naturally, the heat hurts poorest students the most. So, Sterling, I want to start with you. You live in Texas. It's hot down there quite a lot. How much of a burden is it to be surrounded by kids who are a lot dumber than those that are up here near me in Illinois?
Climate change, not climate change, but this story makes my head hurt. It is among the stupidest claims I've ever seen. Now, my first thought when I read this is, well, that would explain a lot of the test scores in the U.S. But the truth is, what it explains is that as liberals have taken over the schools and they've stopped teaching core subjects well, they go to new math or different kinds of math that's gender or equitable math. We perform less well. Now they say, oh, well, it's all across the nation. I'm sorry, I haven't seen all the Indian engineers suddenly become dumb, or them from Pakistan. They seem to be turning out a lot of intelligent people over there through their school systems. It's just unbelievable. And if you see countries where there's heat stress among students, my advice is get some air conditioning in there. Look, the truth is, in California schools, if they're dumb, it's the teacher's fault. It ain't the students and climate change, because they've got air conditioning. They're not sitting there with the open windows being hot. We ain't here in Texas, I guarantee.
Yeah, as a former school board member in California, I have to agree with Sterling's assessment. This is one of the stupidest things I've ever seen. The stupid, really, it burns. It really does. And I got to tell you, it's like these folks have never heard of air conditioning. And I would also point out that the greatest generation that came up through, the 1930s, they went to school with no air conditioning in temperatures that were the most extreme of the 20th century, in the 30s. And they came out great. So this has a lot more to do, with bad policies, like the Department of Education, the dumbing down of standards, so that everybody gets a participation trophy for going to school and being able to add 2 + 2, that kind of stuff. The idea that climate change is affecting intelligence of students is the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
2 + 2 = 4, though, is a racist assumption. You've got to remember, we've got to put this all in equity and be fair to people who think differently than us. 2 + 2 might equal 1 or 3.
Yeah, and I understand that.
That's right. In alternate universes, it might. Yeah, and that's what they live in, an alternate universe.
Yeah, so this study is undoubtedly junk science. I mean, education and learning achievement is multifactorial. Yeah, it may be hot here and there, and it's hot, it's hot in these poor countries. But once again, it's multifactorial, and as Sterling pointed out, In India, it's very hot, but they produce plenty of smart people, and they all leave the country and come here. And it would be difficult to blame temperature on anything that's going on in one country alone, but then just to expand it out to 15 countries because of some nonsense correlations that they rigged up. It has no credibility. To me, this is just recently there have been stories, a lot of stories in the U.S. about how the lack of air conditioning in schools makes it difficult for kids, in May, June, September. But that's not the whole school year. And I don't know how much learning is actually lost. I don't know how much learning is actually gained, based on the performance of recent generations. It's hard to say public school is really living up to its billing. So this is way more complex than these people would like to make it seem.
Well, if what they're saying is true, then I would suspect all the math geniuses to be Inuit, living in Alaska or the Northern Circle, in Siberia. I guess that's where Russia gets all its scientists. I suspect that's not true. I saw that and I like, oh my God, it's just another in the long litany of stories that says in the narrative that climate change causes everything bad.
Yeah, and like you said, Sterling, every single week almost, I would say that we talk about this. And this is once again about my theory that's not really a theory because it's just real, that they will publish anything with a climate spin on it in order to get published, in order to get funding. Hopefully that's changing now under the Trump administration. I can hear the cries and screams and gnashing of teeth with every new departmental cut that he makes. So we will see if these stories continue to come out at quite the pace that they do now.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think it's not, I don't think it's a growth industry, these sorts of studies anymore, but we still have that overlap, they'll run through the pipe and then maybe that'll be the end of it. So we'll see. All right. Speaking of studies and junk science, Steve Milloy is going to love this one too. So I've titled this one, "Well, Stop My Heart." This comes from the European Heart Journal. And the headline of this study is now just bear with us now. Carbon emission analysis of aortic valve replacement, the environmental footprint of transcatheter versus surgical procedures. So this is a genuine academic peer-reviewed paper. There are at least a dozen people that contributed to this study, and it looked at what the carbon footprint of heart surgery is, specifically surgical aortic valve replacement, SAVR, and transcatheter aortic valve replacement, TAVR. And so what they found is that the carbon footprint of the surgical aortic valve replacement is twice as high as that from the transcatheter procedure. And then they laid this all out in lots of complication. And then there's the money quote from the study that I found. Quote, "These findings should potentially be considered when making population level decisions and guidelines moving into the future." So Linnea, yesterday on In the Tank podcast, which you host every Thursday at the same time, 1 p.m. Eastern time on this very channel, we talked about medical ethics. And here is yet another wrinkle that we could talk about on the Climate Realism show, with basically climate alarmists to heart patients drop dead.
Jim, I never want to go to a hospital, not just because it's a bad sign of something that's bad happened to you, but I don't trust any of these doctors. They are all coming out with stuff like this all the time. It's a terrible place to be, to not be able to trust, these institutions that are supposed to be like a line of defense against you dying. But apparently, maybe if my heart surgery or whatever is too costly for the climate, we're going to get like a hurricane or something if I get a heart replacement. And I think I stole this from Sterling actually, but the idea that because someone is like a doctor or because they're an ethicist or something means that they actually are more moral than the average person that you just pluck off the street is not true. It's not the case. Anybody can go into these fields, and you need to have a lot of skepticism, and you should never let utilitarians be in charge of anything.
Yeah, that's the truth. So I'm guessing, not having read the study in full, that you use transcatheter versus surgical for different reasons. That some work better than others in certain situations. So it's a person by person analysis by their surgeon as to which is going to be more effective, long lasting, more permanent. I could be wrong, but if so, then it's not like you can just easily switch between the two. If one doesn't work as well for one patient or isn't going to because of other underlying conditions or background situations, then I hope they don't say, oh, but it won't work as well, but the carbon emissions are lower, so let's go with that. Doctors are supposed to do no harm, not watch out for the planet and ignore the health and welfare of the patient.
This is...
Well, as stupid as this sounds, it's actually kind of a serious problem, because the guy who's in charge of the FDA right now, Marty Makary, in his most recent book, which is called Blind Spots, which is ostensibly a book on junk science, for medical issues, he talks about how, I think it was with respect to appendectomies, there's a certain treatment for appendectomies that lowers the carbon footprint. And Marty Makary is for lowering the carbon footprint. And he actually takes credit for leading the medical industry in lowering the carbon footprint. Now, we all think that emissions are total nonsense, but there are people in the Trump administration that think that this is a real issue. So I think we're going to see more and more of this.
Well, you got to remember, I think FDA is under Kennedy, correct? It doesn't fall under his.
Yeah.
And Kennedy was a climate alarmist. He didn't want windmills off his house, off his shores, but he's okay with them in general. And one of the deals was he cut with Trump. You may remember when he was up on stage and he endorsed Trump. He says, "Yeah, we're going to do a lot of great things with Bobby. He's going to have to shut up about climate, but on healthcare, well, So I suspect he picked this guy."
Yeah, no. So Bobby is a known quantity. I mean, he's a leftist and he's a climate bedwetter. But Marty Makary was totally sane on COVID. But when you get there, almost anything else, he sort of leans towards Bobby Kennedy. And I was just appalled to read that in his book, because he wants to use good science and data where he likes the answer, and where he doesn't like the answer, there's no science or data involved. And this is one of those. I mean, certainly Marty Makary is smart enough to know that climate is a hoax. He's going to look at RFK and go, dude, you don't know, you're not a doctor, you don't know anything. But he doesn't do that. So he's going along for the ride. And I guess I imagine he hopes to implement his agenda.
But do you really think it's a matter of being smart enough? There are a lot of smart people who believe in crap. You can be smart and still have faith that you're right about this X, Y, or Z, and everyone else got it wrong. And I think
I don't know. I mean,
who just believes in climate change.
Yeah, I mean, I believe what I believe because I think I've chased down all the other arguments. And if you're Marty Makary and you haven't chased down all the other arguments, if you haven't figured out why Sterling Burnett is wrong, then you haven't chased down you haven't done your homework. And I don't know what you call that.
Willful ignorance at best.
Okay. But that's kind of stupid to be willfully ignorant. Is stupid.
Anthony, when you want to jump in here?
Yeah, Steve, you've been following junk science for years. You've seen more stupid studies, about climate than probably anybody we know of. And I'm thinking, on What's Up With That, we have a section of the website that has failed climate predictions, where you can look at all of those things, where they said seas are going to destroy nations and all this other crap they've come up with. I think we should create a resource that shows some of the stupidest scientific studies that have ever been published, like this one, and get the big list. And then on our next climate conference, we print out every study And then we'd say to the press, we're having a stupid science study book burning out in the yard. And then we throw them on a bonfire. It will drive them nuts.
We'd have to crowdsource that or get a huge government grant, because that would be a lot of work. I mean, what, Anthony, what climate study is not totally stupid?
Well, I think I saw a list at one time. It may have been on Climate Depot, but it was a list of all the stupidest climate claims. I don't know about studies. It may not have referenced all the studies, but it's like from it causes spousal abuse to an increase in crime to low birth weight to you pick your topic. It had this huge list of all the stupid things it was claiming.
My favorite part about that list was that every single one had its pair. So it would be, it's Charles Rotter is right. It's Number Watch's list. And so it would be like, climate change is causing low birth weight in penguins. Climate change is causing obese baby penguins. Like it was every other one. But bringing it back to the particular issue at hand here. This isn't the first time, and it's, as Steve said, it's not the last that we've seen like a medical system being more worried about carbon footprint or signaling that they're worried about the carbon footprint over the prioritizing the care of the patient. We saw that last year in a study where they looked at anesthesiologists or anesthesia, and they said, well, we need to limit anesthesia use because it's causing climate change or whatever. And that's a horrific thought, that's the cost benefit analysis that they're doing, is that the minuscule, completely meaningless amount of, even if it was causing global warming or whatever, the minuscule amount from the hospital systems, the idea that you would prioritize that over the person who's about to get cut open is crazy, absolutely crazy.
Well, another one that's even more dangerous than that, I think, that one's painful. But last year, the year before, there was a study that said, look, we need to get rid of the very best method and technology for sterilizing surgical instruments because it causes climate, it's contributing to climate change. We need to go with these other methods. They aren't as good. They don't get you as sterile, but who needs sterile instruments when they're cutting into somebody? Jeez.
Anthony?
Yeah, I decided I would quickly ask a very good AI program if you can give me a list of the stupidest climate studies ever published, the ones with absurd claims. And it came back with a top 10 list. And I'm going to read it to you. Read the headline. The climate change causes more divorce study. The fewer pirates cause global warming. The global warming makes your beer taste worse. The climate change increases road rage. The climate change will shrink your fish. The climate change will make coffee extinct. The climate change is racist. The climate change makes kids fat. The climate change makes frogs gay. The climate change kills your sex drive.
Oh no. Well,
now I'm taking climate change seriously with the last one.
Oh yes. Well, look.
Suddenly, RFK's guy is not on the wrong track.
Yeah, I would just, we'll move on. I just wanted to say that's a great reminder, Anthony, that people should visit climaterealism.com, where Sterling, Anthony, Linnea, and sometimes our president, James Taylor, writes stories that correct this kind of nonsense on a weekly basis on all the things that climate change is supposedly making worse. So I definitely recommend you bookmark climaterealism.com and check that out every week. It's fantastic. But it seems to me on this particular subject that Civil War era surgery had a zero carbon footprint. So that apparently is going to be their goal now. So we're like, well, that's to look forward to.
Jim, it might have been made up by all the screaming.
They had to use carbon to make the hand saws.
That's right. Yeah. And all the carbon dioxide that's emitted when you're screaming in pain.
But it's a net carbon sink because a lot of those guys died.
Yeah.
So they stopped breathing and using resources.
Methane, Sterling.
Yep. All right. Yeah. Get a wooden leg. That's also biodegradable. So that works out nicely. All right. Let's move on to our fourth item here in the crazy climate news. And this is Climate Realist Report Backlash. The Climate Realism Report, I should say the climate report that came out, authored by Judith Curry, who we had on the show last week to talk about it, plus our friends Roy Spencer, John Christie, Ross McKittrick, and Steve Koonin, that has caused quite the kerfuffle in mainstream media, but also especially among climate alarmists who are professional climate alarmists in academia and elsewhere. So, Steve Milloy, you're the one who alerted me to this. So let me read this a little bit for our audience for some background. This is from the National Academy of Sciences. National Academies launch fast track review of latest evidence for whether greenhouse gas emissions endanger public health and welfare. And this actually came out just yesterday, so this is breaking news. Apparently, the NAS is going to do a quickie study in an effort to save the endangerment finding, which EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin said last week he's going to get rid of. Let me read a little bit here from it. It's, quote, "It's critical that federal policymaking is informed by the best available scientific evidence," said Marcia McNutt, president of the National Academy of Sciences. "Decades of climate research and data have yielded expanded understanding of how greenhouse gases affect the climate. We are undertaking this fresh examination of the latest climate science in order to provide the most up-to-date assessment to policymakers and the public." This committee will be led by Shirley Tilghman, a professor of molecular biology and public affairs emeritus and the former president of Princeton University. The committee will also include experts in public health, extreme weather, climate modeling, agriculture, infrastructure, and in other areas. Now, I'll just, as an aside, I wonder if Professor Tilghman will invite fellow Princeton professor emeritus Will Happer to join in on the fun. He's been on the fun of this show for quite a few times, so we'll see. I have my doubts.
A microbiologist and a public affairs person leading a climate science assessment.
Yeah, there's a little more to her background too that Steve might fill us in on. But just let me this one last thing to set this up. This is the description of the effort on the page that they have set up for people to come in and to crowdsource their brains into this effort. It says, quote, "This fast-track study will review evidence for whether anthropogenic emissions of greenhouse gases to the atmosphere are reasonably anticipated to endanger public health and welfare in the United States. The study will focus on updates since the EPA finalized the endangerment finding back in 2009, examine how the current understanding compares to the 2009 endangerment finding, and provide explanation for any changes. The study will develop conclusions that describe supporting evidence, the level of confidence, and areas of disagreement or unknowns." And they're going to release this report in September. So, Steve, let me start with you since you drew our attention to this on Thursday. I mean, to me, it looks like panic is setting in here when they have to rush together to do something like this.
Well, I think it's more scheming than panic. I'm not familiar with Shirley Tilghman. I have to look her up, but I am familiar with Marcia McNutt, who's the president of the National Academy of Sciences. First off, the National Academy of Sciences was set up in 1863 as a nonprofit to advise the government on scientific matters. And the way things have evolved over the years is the National Academy of Sciences is really a honorary membership organization where traditionally the best scientists become members. It used to be people like Dick Lindzen were elected to the National Academy of Sciences, but the standard of science has degraded in recent decades. So now people like Michael Mann are regarded as the scientific elite and get elected. So the organization's credibility is, like saturation curves just fall off a cliff. A lot of their work has traditionally been done by federal agencies that hire the National Academy of Sciences through an arm of it called the National Research Council. So these agencies will pay the National Research Council to research issues. Usually they're paying the National Research Council to come up with the answers that they want. And whereas you have the National Academy of Sciences, which is supposed to be this membership of elite scientists, these National Research Council panels are really comprised of third, fourth tier scientists, resume builders, not really well known, that will do whatever they're, just go along to get along. So you don't really get good work out of them. The reports are invariably just, hundreds of pages long with just nonsense. But as I said, mostly it's federal agencies paying the National Research Council to do this. Here, they say they're doing this on their own nickel. and at their own sort of initiative. And I've just never seen that before. I mean, maybe they've done that a few times, but I've never seen it. And I've never seen it in the context of a rulemaking where the comment period ends in September. So they're going to form a committee, take public comment, which is due by August 27th, and then turn it around for September 15th comments. I mean, that's just, to me, that means that the answers are already cooked up. They've already done their work. I mean, for all I know, they're just going to take all the IPCC reports, put them in a single PDF and submit that. And the whole idea here is to bollocks up what the Trump administration is trying to do. And, if they were to collect all the IPCC reports and send them in, they would expect the Trump administration to raise or to analyze and rebut every single point in those. And what this is doing is setting the Trump administration up for litigation failure, because it's going to be impossible on the timescale the Trump administration needs to get things done to respond to every sort of point raised in the IPCC. So there's nothing good faith about this. As National Academy of Sciences is not this prestigious elite organization anymore. It's just it's like the IPCC. It's just another organization of politically oriented hacks. So my solution for this is for the Trump administration to start defunding the NAS. Martian McNutjob should be fired. And the whole organization really needs to be rethought. It's not 1863 anymore. We don't need to have the National Academy of Sciences. It doesn't really do any interesting or original work. It's just a group of hacks.
The federal government doesn't fund it directly, like Steve said. They fund research that goes to them. They contract out, and those contracts can be cut. And my suspicion is, if they cut those contracts, they say starting tomorrow, we no longer work with the NAS, and we won't work with NAS affiliated authors if you do that. My suspicion is whatever the report comes out in September, they'll start backtracking on it real quickly, like Harvard and Columbia and various educational institutions are doing about anti-Semitism that they claimed wasn't occurring before, but now they said, "Oh yeah, it's happening. We've got to do something about that. It's serious." I think that they start backtracking. It's not coincidence. It's a direct response to the DOE's climate science report, and it's a rush job because it's going to be nothing more than a bigger, broader attribution, which climate realism has debunked multiple times. These attribution studies aren't science.
Well,
they are.
I don't know that it's a rush job. I think they've been preparing this for a while. It's just that it's a rush job now because September 15th is the deadline for comments, and they want to get something in so that they can screw up the rulemaking. If they get their report after the comment period closes, the Trump administration doesn't have to pay attention to it. So they need to get something in. The rush job is this sort of act to make it sound like, yes, we're really concerned about this, and we're going to take everybody's comment. How are they going to take comments? I mean, the comment period is in 45 days. How are they going to form a panel, take public comments, and in a legitimate way, and then do a report? I mean, it's unheard of.
Yeah, it's impossible. It's form a panel, do a report, then take comments, and then get them in. Respond to comment. You got to respond to comments, right?
I think Congress should investigate this. For all I know, they say, "Oh, we're doing this on our own dime." Well, like you mentioned, Sterling, the National Research Council is a nonprofit. National Academy of Sciences is a nonprofit, although they're related. And George Soros, for example, could contribute money, or some foundation, and there are plenty of left-wing foundations that would contribute. The Rockefellers, I'm sure the Rockefellers have donated to the National Academy of Sciences in the past. I can see them doing it now for this because the Rockefeller Foundation has purchased the AP to be its climate propaganda arm. So the whole thing is illegitimate, and the Trump administration needs to be aware, and Congress needs to investigate.
Even that's a joke, though. The idea that they're funding it themselves. Look, we know money is fungible. It's no more free of federal support or their own. Remember, they get a cut of every grant made to them, right? They get overhead. They get probably 15, 20% of every federal grant for research goes to the NAS for overhead. Just like Planned Parenthood says, look, we never use federal dollars for abortion. No, it's just the federal dollars being there means you can use other money for that. Well, this is the same thing here. Oh, we're not taking any federal dollars to we're funding this ourselves. Yeah, but the federal dollars you got flowing in for the other things makes this possible for them.
But it's unprecedented that just because there's a rulemaking that the NAS decide, we need to get involved. I mean, it's just I've never seen that. Maybe it's happened before, but I'm not aware of it. Usually, EPA will hire the NAS to provide cover for something it wants to do. That's essentially what the National Research Council is. They never provide good advice or useful advice. They just provide cover for whoever is hired them, in my experience.
All right. Anything to contribute to that, Anthony, before we move on?
Nope.
New? All right. Well, I guess we will see. We'll see how that plays out, but it is interesting, I think. Yeah.
We'll see. Like, I can't predict how that will play out.
We'll be talking about this again, I'm sure.
We will be talking about it again, and we'll be able to compare it to the comment periods that we have participated in when the reports were all alarmist nonsense, and how we were treated and how the comment period went. So we will have a unique perspective on that.
I think Anthony should print off a PDF of his entire website and submit it to the NAS. Right?
Thank you. That'd be, gosh, I don't know. That's like,
copy and
almost 20 years worth of post. In fact, we're wrestling with that right now, trying to come up with a new version of what's up with that. But we've got such a huge database, this freight train of content, we're having trouble with it.
Yeah. Well, you can just copy and paste the URL and you'll be done, and kick your feet up and have a beer, and you've done your job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's get to what I wanted to have as our main topic today, and that is how EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin and Energy Secretary Chris Wright are just crushing it in the media right now. And I guess even we've been in this business a long time, and sometimes we can get a little cynical. And we've had a lot of experience watching non-leftist administrations try to communicate the climate realist perspective, and have, not to be mean, but it's always not good enough. They'll come up wanting. But things are changing right now, especially with these two gents. So I wanted to get a story here. This is from Bonchi over at Red State, and we'll be playing a clip of this in a minute. The headline is Lee Zeldin takes deer in headlights CNN host apart over climate change, and then the double down comes. He writes, Lee Zeldin left a CNN host staring blankly for nearly 2 minutes on Monday as he took her apart regarding a recent proposal at EPA. As the interview started, host Casey Hunt dumped an attempted gotcha question on the EPA administrator, asking him if he accepts the, quote, overwhelming scientific consensus about man-made climate change. But he was clearly prepared with facts, and for once we got to see it. So let's play Zeldin CNN. Can we, Andy?
Do you accept the overwhelming scientific consensus that these greenhouse gas emissions are the biggest drivers of man-made climate change?
Well, it's great to be on with you. First, it's worth pointing out that all 8 or so images that you just posted on the screen have nothing to do with this week's announcement. What was the 2009 endangerment finding had to do was with regards to mobile sources vehicles. This week's proposal to rescind the 2009 endangerment finding was with regards to mobile sources vehicles. CNN's been using a lot of photos where they show smokestacks of stationary sources like power plants. That's not what we proposed. Now, going back to 2009, the science that they were reviewing included both optimistic to pessimistic scenarios. To reach the 2009 endangerment finding, they relied on the most pessimistic views of the science. The great news is that a lot of the pessimistic views of the science in 2009 that was being assumed ended up not panning out. Hey, that's great. We can rely on 2025 facts as opposed to 2009 bad assumptions. The other thing, too, is that at EPA, we don't just get to creatively make the law whatever we want it to be. The Supreme Court ruled in Loper-Bright, overturning the Chevron doctrine, West Virginia versus EPA, Michigan versus EPA, that agencies like the EPA can't just use vague language in statute and try to make it be whatever we want it to be. The major policy doctrine also says that when you're going to reach something like an endangerment finding and then have trillions of dollars of regulation, that's something that should be decided by our elected members of Congress in passing statute.
Yeah, that's really something. Steve Milloy, you were on the EPA transition team for Trump 1.0, and both of the EPA administrators that the first Trump administration had, I would say neither of them performed anything like we just saw right there, let alone understood, I think, the endangerment finding and why it needs to go, as well as Lee Zeldin did. And he's only been on the job for about 6 months.
Well, I think they understood it. They were just afraid to do anything about it. And the difference between Trump 1.0 and Trump 2.0 is that Trump 2.0, there's an urgency to it. And he staffed his administration with people who are committed to the MAGA agenda, and President Trump thinks that climate is a hoax, and so they're implementing it at EPA, and that starts with getting rid of the endangerment finding. And, congratulations to Lee Zeldin, who seems to have the right level of knowledge for his position. I mean, usually Republicans run away from talking about climate, but he's a lawyer and he understands the legal basics of the regulatory process and what has happened in the past in climate. And he does a really good job in all his media appearances of making the important points. I mean, he's not going to be able to talk about the science like we do because he hasn't been doing this for 30 years like we have. But he does a great job. And Chris Wright is also very good. He has his momentary slip-ups, like in his confirmation hearing, but generally, he's very good at this. These guys are committed to getting rid of the endangerment finding, and it's all going to wind up in court. But in the meantime, at least we have people in the administration who are they want to get rid of this. I mean, even if in Trump 1.0, if EPA had tried to get rid of this, it's because they would have been. It's because they would have been forced to do it, not because they wanted it. These guys want to get rid of it. They want the MAGA agenda to succeed. So, my hat is off to them. I think they're doing a great job.
Well, Steve, you spoke very eloquently about all of those things. I'm going to be ineloquent and say he opened up a can of whoop ass on CNN.
Well, you certainly did, and you ain't seen nothing yet. So we actually have another clip. This one is a little longer. I usually don't cut a clip this long for this show. It's about 2 minutes, but it was actually an 8-minute interview, and it's about 2 minutes, but it's worth watching the whole thing. This is Chris Wright, also on CNN. I give the interviewer a little bit of credit for pushing him and actually knowing a little bit about her stuff instead of just talking points. But Chris Wright, again, opened up a can of a whoop ass on Caitlin Collins on this. And he actually suggests that, as you said, Steve, they're full steam ahead and they know what they're doing, and they're doing because they want to do it and because the science backs it up. So let's play that longish clip of Chris Wright, Energy Secretary on CNN.
So we have this new report sitting here that has come out from your department. It's basically backing up what the president talked about so much on the campaign trail in terms of what his energy policy was going to look like and what he wanted to do, but also undo that President Biden and others had done when it comes to rolling back climate regulations. It argues that more carbon dioxide in the air is good for plant growth, that sea levels are not accelerating. When it comes to the authors of this report, some people have raised questions about their findings. How did you personally select these authors? Why did you pick them?
Oh, I've been in the climate debate and discussion for over 20 years. So I know certainly a lot of people in that world. And I just made a list of who do I think are the true honest scientists. They follow the data and the facts where they lead them. They don't have a political agenda or a desired policy or a desired thing. They're just honest scientists. There's plenty of those, but I made a list of about a dozen of them that I thought were very senior and very well respected. I called the top 5 and everyone said yes. So what we wanted them to write was not start the science anew, but just summarize what do we know? What have been the conclusions of people studying, gathering data on climate change? The 5 of them work together great. And it's also an opening. It's an opening. We want to have a real debate and discussion about climate change and get away from the cancel culture Orwellian, if you don't say the thing the approved climate church says, you're silenced. That just crushed science. That just crushed progress. So no, this is open for public comment now. There'll be responses to those public comments. We'll probably have public events here in D.C. this fall. We want to have an honest dialogue with the American people about climate change.
But if it's open for public comments, I mean, the EPA is already using this to change its policy. It's citing this report. And some people have criticized the report, saying the information was cherry-picked by people who had already predetermined, what they wanted to say in this report. What would you say to them?
Oh, absolutely not. The report references the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change reports over 100 times. This report actually isn't radical or anything out of the conventional lines. It's just the media and the popular world never reads the actual details of climate change. This is really a summary of what do we know from the data. Now, saying all that in one place, amazingly, is controversial today.
Yeah.
Good.
It's so good. Anthony, I do want to start with you. I mean, you've been countering climate alarmism for a very long time. I mean, we all have, but nobody really longer than you, maybe Steve, it's been a long time. And while some public officials have been pretty good when talking about climate and energy, we grade them on a curve, but we're still kind of disappointed. He could have just been reading from What's Up With That, everything that he said on CNN, and they don't have any answers for it. This is quite remarkable, and I think a fantastic sign for the future.
Yeah, well, I've been told privately that Chris Wright reads What's Up With That on a regular basis. So when he said he's been in the climate debate for 20 years, that means he's reading, people like myself, Roy Spencer, Judy Scurry. He's seen all of these arguments that we've made. And I see what that report came about, or how it came about, was him choosing to address those arguments. And he did it in a way that actually pitted some of the people against each other. I mean, Spencer didn't exactly agree with Curry, and Curry didn't exactly agree with Coonan. I mean, it was like the Supreme Court, where there's some dissent going on, there's some dissenting views there. But what they did is they came up with a fantastic report in a short amount of time that talked about the things that the climate establishment doesn't want to talk about. And they don't want to talk about those things because it affects their gravy train, their funding. If someone comes out, in the climate establishment and said, like Michael Mann, for example, can you imagine if he said, I was wrong, there's not really a crisis, we should just simply get back to looking at mitigation and not worry about it. The whole thing would fall apart. The government funding collapses, all the scientific world collapses, the whole thing falls apart. So the climate establishment continuance is predicated on the fact that they have to continue to receive funding. And this report threatens that. And that's why they're going absolutely berserko.
Berserko. All right. New catchphrase for Anthony.
I've been just thrilled with Zeldin and Wright, both of them. I was so nervous during the hearings. We did those super long live stream during them, and I was like, "Oh man, why would he say it that way? Oh, why would he say it that way?" But you know what? Everything has been so great. I am going to be a plan truster when it comes to Trump's administration on the climate front. And I'm not going to throw out the good for the in search of the perfect here. But I will say that Wright's commentary on CNN there was what I would consider the perfect way to address this issue to CNN's audience. Absolutely perfect way of delivering that. I loved it. He threaded that needle extremely well.
It's because he knows what he's talking about. And it is so rare that, in fact, it's impossible. If they weren't in the positions they were in, CNN would never have somebody that knowledgeable on climate change as a guest on their program. They would never have Steve Milloy on to talk like that, when he could, obviously. But they had no choice. The guy's the head of EPA, the guy's the energy secretary, and they just released a report that all the climate alarmist scientists are losing their brains over. So they had no choice, and they had to sit there, stare into the camera, and let them go. I loved it.
I do think that they have introduced some unnecessary risk into this whole process. Trump had issued an executive order in April saying that regulations that were illegal per recent Supreme Court decisions could just be terminated without notice and public comment. And I think they should have done that with the endangerment finding. They could still issue this report, and the other side could chew on it all they wanted. This way, by proposing to get rid of the endangerment finding versus just getting rid of it, they're making it subject to litigation because, we can be right as rain, and we are, but federal court system is not a place where facts get determined. There are places where they're a place where judgments get made, and until this gets to the Supreme Court on the right issue, we don't know how it's going to turn out. If they had just terminated this, they would have gotten sued right away. It would have gone to the Supreme Court, and the issue would have been, is Massachusetts versus EPA, which is the Supreme Court decision that allowed EPA to regulate greenhouse gases. That quite possibly would have been overturned, and this whole issue would have become a big nothing burger. But as it is, there's going to be litigation. You've got this NAS thing going now, and it's going to be unnecessarily delayed, complicated. They could have just taken the Occam's razor approach and just said it's illegal and we're done with it.
Yeah, for sure. Now, one thing we're going to go here to Q&A here in a second. So there was another wrinkle to the story, which maybe we will cover next week, and it is that Chris Wright allegedly or supposedly talked about looking back at the former national climate assessments and quote unquote updating them, and that has them in a panic too. It's a great story. I want to get to Q&A, but maybe we'll hit that next week for sure, because I don't think that controversy is going away either. But before we get to Q&A, I want to read something very important and very exciting for this program, because we have a sponsor to this here program, and that sponsor is Advisor Metals. Now, if you listen to a lot of conservative shows, you hear tons of pitches for buying precious metals. Well, we're here to tell you that you should be trusting Advisor Metals over all of them, because we do, and that's because it's the man who runs the company, Ira Brashatsky. He's the managing member and owner of Advisor Metals, and he has decades of experience in precious metals and is the only person in the physical precious metals industry who has the Commodities Future Trading Commission federal registration. What does that mean for you? It means that everything that Ira or a member of his team tell you has to be factual. So there's no sales pitch or bait and switch, and he is held to the highest ethical standards, and there is full transparency doing business with Ira. So if you want to diversify your investment portfolio and your savings, if you are planning for retirement and you're concerned about economic uncertainty, if you want a tangible asset that is easy to buy and sell, you can secure your assets with a wide range of physical precious metals by getting in touch with our friend Ira at Advisor Metals. He will make this whole process very, very easy for you. So please visit climaterealismshow.com/metals, and you can leave your information for Ira and get started with investing in precious metals and expand your current portfolio. That's climaterealismshow.com/metals. And when you talk to Ira, be sure to let him know who sent you, because that will help out this program while also helping your financial future at Advisor Metals. All right. Thank you for your attention to this matter, as somebody famous on social media tends to say. Linnea, it is time for Q&A. Take it away.
All right, getting my dandy notebook here. So we have the first question I want to bring up is from one of our frequent viewers. This is from Luke Starkenberg, who says, we haven't heard about Texas and California facing blackouts and brownouts due to heat waves in a while, which is good. Why is that? What's changing? Sterling, I think you wanted to take that.
I pulled a Jim. I can't speak as much to California, though I suspect if you look, their temperatures have been below recent years for the summer, but they have in Texas. In Texas, whereas typically we might have 15 or 17 days, in extreme cases, over 50 or 60 days of over 100 during the summer, we've had 3. They were in the low hundreds. So we're not putting as much stress on the supply. We have added natural gas since the blackouts in the winter of 2021. And prices have gone up. And so some of us, like myself, have turned up their thermostats. I always swore I would never go to the federal standard of 72 because I like to be cool. I kept my thermostat, I myself kept my thermostat down to 67 last year. This year it is at 71. I refuse to go higher. But the point is, I've talked to other people who are also suffering from high bills, and they said we've had to turn up our thermostat. So there is less demand because the temperatures aren't as high. There's more supply, and the prices are so much higher than they used to be because of the addition of wind and solar that some people are making a little bit of a sacrifice in comfort.
Sterling, your thermostat temperature choice is diabolical. That is way too cold inside a house. No. That's like grocery store temperatures. That's crazy.
First thing I do when I go to a hotel room is I go over and I go 67. That's what it's going down to. My wife can throw a blanket over her head. I don't care. I'm getting 67.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I guess it's just that.
Boom.
Jim, you're
I
pulling
sleep at 65.
Yeah. I like my dining room to be cold enough to hang meat in there, so I don't have to use the fridge.
My house is set at 75, and then at night I turn it down to 73.
Oh, you are a glutton.
That's crazy. Oh yeah, and I am sure all of our British viewers are going to be wigging out now, and all of our European viewers too, because they don't know what air conditioning is. It's awesome. All right. All right. So here's a question from frequent viewer Polly, who says, "Why would a little global warming be dangerous when people on Earth still die from cold at about 10 times the rate compared to heat?"
That's a great question.
Anybody want to jump on that?
Well, there's no evidence that it is dangerous. Since we've been burning fossil fuels, humanity has gone from 1 billion to more than 8 billion. Standard of living has increased exponentially. Global GDP has increased exponentially. I mean, what's not to like? This whole thing is just a concocted scare. There's nothing to it. So, what global warming are we talking about, and what harm?
Infant mortality is down. Lifespans are up. Household wealth is up. Fewer people starve today than have starved ever before. As he says, what's not to like? And it shows the huge studies published in the Lancet have shown just what he says. Cold kills more people every year than hot, and as the temperatures have risen just modestly, there have been substantially fewer deaths from from cold weather, and the measured increase in heat-related deaths is within the margin of error.
Yeah, and I would say we already experienced significant climate change year on year. One year is warmer or colder than another, and we manage that just fine. And it's the same thing in a single month. You have, or in a single season, we go from winter to spring, we go from cold to warm, and we don't see people dropping like flies. We go from spring to summer, and then the media comes out, oh no, it's the hottest ever, we're dying, and all this other stuff. And humanity has managed significant change in temperatures really well, and we're getting even better at it. So yeah, a little global warming, no big deal.
You manage it day to day. I mean, throughout the day, temperatures can change 15, 20 degrees. Here in Texas, it goes down during the summer to 80 at night, but then it goes up to 97 during the day. That's a 17 degree. We manage it. And I look around, and maybe this is one of the reasons that deaths are down. in so many places, but especially in America from non-optimum temperatures, is people can retire in places they didn't live their whole lives. And when they retire, where they're not retiring to is Minnesota or North Dakota. They're retiring to Florida and Texas, maybe Arizona, Crossville, Tennessee. I'm sorry. They've decided they are voting with their feet and their dollars that hot is better than cold.
All righty, guys, we're gonna move on here. Our chat is just so funny. All right, so this is a question from Terry Barnes, which is a little bit of a sarcastic question, but I'm gonna bring it up anyway. Who says, I wonder what the carbon footprint of mandating disposable surgical masks for millions of people was. Yeah, I can only imagine. Plus all the plastics and who knows what else.
Yeah, forget about the carbon footprint. Think about the real pollution, especially in the oceans from those things.
Yeah, so I mean, but that's sort of a good example. I mean, during COVID, there was a reduction in emissions, but the weather stayed the same. Nothing really changed. It was their environmental quality, air quality was the same, climate was the same, everything was the same. It doesn't make any difference.
All right. From our friend Climate Bell here, who says, I defy Bill Nye, and therefore I am a true denier. Will you join me in this decision? Yes, we are all deniers. Thank you, Climate Bell. Do we have a drum?
I was denier before denying Bill Nye was cool.
I never thought he was.
There he is for us.
All right. This is a question from Nuts and Bolts, who says, who funds the IPCC?
Well, it's United Nations does it. So basically, it's a contribution from the United Nations, and that, of course, they get their contributions from all of the member countries. And so it's pretty much sum it up. It's global graft.
And who's the biggest donor to the UN? The United States. So
I dance, but it sounds like some fucking commie gobbledygook.
I think there's also some direct U.S. funding. I doubt that Trump is going to continue with it, but there has been.
Yeah, they've already pulled that.
Yeah.
Hey, well, actually, so what happened to that global climate fund that Trump didn't want to contribute to, but then Biden wanted to contribute to it? Has anyone kept track of all that funding, billions we were supposed to be sending to
Green
that?
Fund?
Yeah, the Green Fund, like the global fund that we were supposed to.
You know, they've collected about less than 1% of what they're supposed to collect, and so not enough to fund the corruption.
I suspect that most of it went away when they cut so much from the international, the foreign aid and from the State Department, because that's where the money was coming from.
I don't think there's been actually much actual cash that has gone into it. A lot of promises, but not much delivery.
Alrighty. So from Redneck Screw Loose, we have Tom Nelson and Dr. Holmes talked about how the rural temperature data is being adjusted to match urban temperature data. How long has this been going on? Anthony?
Oh, reminds me of an old song by Ace. How long has this been going on? It's been going on since they really decided to co-opt the surface temperature record for climate purposes. The surface temperature record was put together in 1892, started by the U.S. Weather Bureau, and it was designed to be a forecast verification tool. They put out weather stations with cooperative observers all across the country so that they could verify, did the forecast we make any sense? We forecasted 86 degrees and only got up to 82. We forecasted 1.5 inches of rain. We only had 0.3. Those are the kind of things that the original Cooperative Observer Network were designed to do. And then, after the climate scare took off after 1988, they decided, we'll just use this network for basically determining how hot it's getting, and so forth and so on. And then they started with all kinds of things like homogenization. Now, homogenization is the culprit here. Homogenization causes, if you have one station in one place, it gets compared with all of its other neighbors and smoothed. And so it's like making a big hot mess of soup. You might have a cold spot in the soup, but it gets homogenized. It gets stirred essentially. So that cold spot goes away. And so that's what's happening with the rural stations. They are being overwhelmed by the majority of stations that are urban, have warmer temperatures, and the majority of stations that are poorly sited and have microclimate biases associated with asphalt, concrete, and waste heat.
I compare it to you have bottled water, and then you have a stream, and you pour out half the water and you fill the bottle with the stream water, and you think you're getting better quality water. Well, that's what they're doing with the rural and urban data. They're mixing them, they're homogenizing them, and so they're making them they're making them less accurate, more climate alarm friendly, but less locally accurate for weather purposes.
Yeah. Water now with Giardia.
Yeah. Here's a question from Samwat, who I think I'm pronouncing that right, who hasn't been in the chat for a while. So welcome back, friend. So this is a question. If CO2 had the effect they claim, wouldn't areas affected by forest fire smoke experience extreme hot temperatures? I think probably the ash, like the soot component of wildfires, blocks out enough sun to counteract anything that could possibly happen from that. But guys, if you have a more scientific explanation.
You got it right, Linnea. That's exactly what's going on. Even though there's more carbon dioxide locally, it is completely overwhelmed by the soot and smoke, blocking out more light from the sun. So it actually cools underneath,
But then again, when the soot's in the air, it may cool, but wherever it falls, it heats. That's the problem they have with soot falling on glaciers and things, melting the glaciers. The surface temperature rises. I had a professor that I was on stage with who did studies, he learned how to milk the climate gravy train. And he went and studied glaciers in Mexico, and he knew temperatures hadn't changed. But he said, well, I'm afraid global warming is causing the glaciers to melt. I need to go study it. He got all this money from ski groups and some other groups to study climate change. And he came to the conclusion that, no, the people were farming higher up the mountain. They were doing slash and burn agriculture. The soot was falling on the glaciers, and that was causing glacial melt. The temperature hadn't changed at the peak.
Awesome. Okay. This is a good question. I'm going to pitch this one to Steve. From Stan Pickett, what do you think the biggest hurdle will be in endangerment finding litigation? Oh, bye, Sterling. You have to go. All right. Bye.
Yes, that's the-
What do you think the biggest hurdle will be in endangerment finding litigation? Hopefully, it'll be minor at best.
Yeah. Well, so I think the biggest hurdle is going to be the fact that it's going to be he said, she said, as decided under the Administrative Procedure Act. The agency, because of prior Supreme Court decisions, the agency will no longer be deferred to its interpretation of science. So it's essentially going to be jump ball. And, I think it's just going to be ugly. As I mentioned earlier, the mistake was not to just terminate the endangerment finding because it was illegal and EPA had no business doing it, versus now we're going to argue about science. No one knows what's going to happen. And the Greens are, as we can see from this surprise National Academy of Sciences review, they're pretty creative. They're much better at government. They're much better at litigation than conservatives are. So I'm a little worried about this. I mean, I'm comforted by the fact that, Chief Justice Roberts wrote the minority opinion against Massachusetts versus EPA. So I think with the 6-3 majority, we're going to win. But I just think that it could have been done differently.
One thing that occurred to me is that they're going to be throwing pretty much everything that they can at this, including the kitchen sink. But the good news is that we no longer can have a federal judge just step in and say, you can't cancel that because, I say so. That has been completely removed from the equation now, from any kind of presidential executive orders. So the fact that Trump has made an executive order to look at climate and do it rationally and logically, they can't do a whole lot about that, at least on the federal judge injunction level. But they are going to throw all kinds of roadblocks at this, and a lot of them are going to be, emotional. A lot of them are going to be ridiculous, and a lot of them are going to be, frankly, fraudulent. But that's the way they roll.
Yeah. Well, so this litigation goes straight to the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, and then to the Supreme Court, and we don't have many friends in the DC Circuit. So we're just, hold tight. It's going to be a bumpy ride. I think we'll prevail in the end. But, also remember, we don't know what's going to happen in 2026 or 2028. Those will also be important outcomes that will, affect some of this. So I would have just gotten rid of it easier.
All right. Here's from Climate Bell. Question for your panel at some point. If peer-reviewed journals have editorial bias towards the climate alarmism narrative, where does one get adjudication of contrary science?
I wish I knew. Honestly, we've got a couple of journals out there that will publish, contrarian climate papers, but for the most part, they don't even make it up to the peer review stage. They get outright rejected. No, I'm sorry, this isn't appropriate for our exclusively super duper, snotty journal. So it's really hard. A lot of folks just simply say, I'm not even going to bother with the peer review process, and put it up on archives, at Cornell University. And this is what William Happer had to do with his latest CO2 paper. And the traditional gatekeepers wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. They wouldn't even give it a fair shake. So he just published it up on archive on Cornell and allow people to look at it from there. And that gets pretty good distribution. That's about the only place I know of.
The proper way to do science is to make a prediction and see if it comes true. This business of trying to adjudicate, competing claims that are not predictions and, are analyses of past events, that's going to be really futile. And, climate modeling, there's nothing inherently wrong with it. Make a prediction, see if it comes out true. They never do that. Or if they have done it, it's, turned out the other way. But, that's the way to adjudicate science, make a prediction and see if it happens. And we don't do that anymore. We argue about things that can never be proven or disproven.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add something here. The title of today's program is Trump Team Crushing Media Mid-wits. And I found it, I'm sure you guys noticed it too, but suddenly now on CNN, it's important for a different viewpoint to come in when it comes to climate change and energy policy, when for literally 30 years, CNN would never allow a dissenting voice on there, let alone the peer-reviewed journals allowing proper comment and proper peers that I actually might disagree with them on something. So keep your listeners and watchers of this program, keep your eye out for that and noticing that suddenly now, after all this time, but now we have to have a broad range of views when it comes to the climate, where we didn't have any, we only had one viewpoint for literally 30 years.
Well, I'm going to be a little bit cynical about that. I think what CNN is doing is inviting Trump administration officials on, hoping they can get a soundbite out of it, hoping that they'll trip on themselves and say, well, I'm not a scientist, or something like that. We're just something completely crazy, and then make hay with it.
Well, they're 0 for 2.
Here's a question from Bob, and I'm curious about this as well, how this would work, actually. Why don't you start your own journal?
Well, I'd actually tried that back in 2014, and it didn't go so well, mainly because I couldn't get people to participate. Getting reviewers and so forth out of the climate science community was difficult, if not impossible. And so we ended up with this microcosm. And you can't really run a journal properly, scientifically, without a broad spectrum of people to review things. We can't just have the same, a dozen or so people reviewing stuff, because then it becomes an echo chamber. So until science decides to open up and allow these alternate viewpoints, it's not going to be easy.
Right. Are you telling me you didn't want to cultivate an echo chamber where you don't let climate alarmists come and try to publish in your journal?
Well, they don't want to. They don't
Yeah.
want to be associated. I mean, you look at people like Gavin Schmidt, Dr. Gavin Schmidt of NASA GIS. He wouldn't even be in the same room during a television interview with Dr. Roy Spencer. That's the kind of rejection we're dealing with here. You're supposed to be a scientist. You're supposed to follow the science. But when you won't even get in the same room with someone who has a different viewpoint from you, not an angry viewpoint, not an insulting viewpoint, just a different viewpoint about the data, that really speaks to the fact that you and your colleagues have become exceptionally petty.
Yep.
I
Absolutely.
think the way to settle this is to open up some climate betting in Vegas and have people.
Or we have a cage fight.
I wonder. That'd be the weirdest. I don't even know. I don't even know how that would go. Who would you put in that cage fight?
I'd go to a cage fight. I'd take on a cage fight with Michael Mann any day of the week and twice on Sundays.
Yeah.
Put me in, coach.
Alrighty, so these are a couple of questions that are related to one another from Riss Reed, which are, if NAS submits all the IPCC reports, can't we just say we looked at all of those when we made our latest assessments? And will some researchers be afraid of submitting to the NAS because of the administration and potential retaliation? Don't know.
Well, it all depends on the judges you get and what their inclination is. I mean, they may say that that kind of blanket statement is not good enough. You have to address every individual point raised. Once again, this is just unnecessarily complicated now.
Okay. Let's see. We have this is a interesting one from Arthur Morgan. I don't know if we've sorry, I'm laughing a little bit because I know the reference, but this particular story that's being referenced here, what do you think about the climate lockdowns in Canada? I believe what's being referenced, I got asked this last night on a radio show. I guess there's some wildfire potential in Nova Scotia, and so in response to this, they're not letting anybody do any activities in the woods at all in order to try to prevent it. Basically just saying, all of the outdoors are off limits for now, which is interesting.
Well, people are the major cause of wildfires. People and lightning are the two major causes.
Yeah. I don't know if this is good policy or not. I probably doubt it, but a lot of these
regulate
wildfires,
lightning.
Yeah, exactly.
Just regulate lightning, and no more lightning in the forest. Put up signs and put up a $1,000 fine for lightning strikes. That about is useful.
Arthur, if you have a more detailed question regarding this, but it sucks. I wouldn't want to be in Nova Scotia and be a frequent hiker right now.
It's a good thing tourism isn't very important in Nova Scotia in the summer.
Yeah, they don't care about that stuff up there. K1 is so funny. K1 goes, no more curling either. They've taken it all from you. Oh yeah. So John Z says, and again, I don't know if this is true or not, but again, apparently people aren't allowed to visit Nova Scotia recreationally, and people who own property aren't allowed to go out in their own woods either. And it's a $25,000 fine to walk in the woods in Nova Scotia. So, yikes, that's no good at all. Let's get one more question because we are running out of time here. Okay. This is from Chris Nisbet, who is a frequent viewer of ours, who says, can the dynamic duo, Wright and Zeldin, in government have any influence over the data tampering or homogenization? So can these guys have any effect whatsoever on standards at NASA and NOAA?
Probably not, because those are separate agencies, and these guys aren't part of those agencies. They can send over memos and so forth and say, hey, stop this practice. But what we really need is to have the NOAA administrator on board, because NOAA collects all of the temperature data and NOAA processes all of the temperature data. Even NASA GISS, which does its own temperature analysis of global temperature, relies on NOAA. So the focus has to be on NOAA. And if we can get NOAA to say, you know what, maybe homogenization isn't such a good idea, or maybe we should just use the Climate Reference Network instead of all these crap stations that we've got out there, then we've got something.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Well, I'm going to hand it back to Jim here because I think we have gone over again. I don't think we've ever had a show where we didn't go over.
We haven't, and we've had some people in the chat say, come on, just admit it. It's a 90-minute show, and just admit it and make it that so. Although that would drive Andy crazy, I think. Anyway, thank you all for being here with us today on another fantastic episode of the Climate Realism Show. I want to thank our special guest, Steve Milloy, the climate hoax slayer. Check him out at Junk Science on X and also junkscience.com. Thank you, the departed, not dearly departed, he just left early, Sterling Burnett of the Heartland Institute. Thank you very much, Anthony and Linnea as well. And thank you, our viewers and viewers and listeners of this program, especially you in the chat. It always makes it a lot more fun, not just for us, but for everybody listening and watching. And so we will talk to you again next week. Bye-bye.